Hi, I'm Dr. Wendy LeBorgne, and I am talking to you today from Cincinnati, Ohio. And with me on the podcast today, I have Dr. Katherine Jolly, who is an assistant professor of music at St. Louis University in the College of Arts and Sciences in the Department of Fine Arts and Performing Arts. She has taught for Opera Theater St. Louis's spring training program, Union Avenue's Opera Crescendo training program, the Boston University Tanglewood Institute, and the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music, Randolph College, Sacramento State University, and Mary Baldwin College. Quite accomplished. She's a frequent adjudicator for NATS competitions and received a doctorate of musical arts from CCM in 2015, where she also taught private voice and classroom voice, and did her master's degree also at CCM as an Albert Yates Scholar. You graduated in 1999 from Boston University, where you received the Ellelu Dimmock Vocal Excellence Award. So I am so excited to have you on our podcast today, talking about this work that you've been doing with singers and keeping them physically stress-free and vocally healthy. So tell me a little bit about you, Katherine.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so excited to be here today and have a chance to talk to you about all of this. I think this all stems from my own personal experience, coming from a background of dance and yoga and obviously singing, finding myself kind of thrust forth into the professional world, which is very fast-paced, and there could be so many things happening at once, and I think it's really necessary that singers find tools where they can really ground themselves so that their breathing, their heart rates, their kind of mental, emotional states can be at an even keel so that they can sing at their optimal levels, which sometimes is challenging if the career takes off at a fast pace. So my interest in this research in terms of finding ways of calming the breath and lowering heart rates and really grounding oneself came out of my own experience, and then in my experience observing my own students and in their performances and auditions, and kind of watching the transition that happens between the studio and the big stage. So that's where all of this kind of started, and I found that there was quite a bit of research that had been done, but not nearly as much as one would have anticipated, given the amount of singers that admit to their own struggles with performance anxiety. So I was happy to be able to contribute a little bit to the field, and I'm hoping to contribute more in the years to come.
Good. Yeah, I think one of the focuses for this month, because February is Heart Health Month, and singers are forever under stress, whether it is in just their daily lives or whether it is with performance anxiety, the stress of competition. Where do you find that most of the singers in your study experienced the biggest amounts of stress? What were their biggest contributing factors?
Sure. So we had several different areas in which they were exploring their kind of emotional quotient factors, and those were in lessons, in coachings, in master classes, in auditions, in rehearsals, in performances, in competitions. And interestingly enough, a lot of them felt kind of similar levels in master classes or in coachings, depending on if they were coaching with, fairly high-level professionals or visiting coaches, as they did in auditions or competitions, and the heart rate spiked significantly. Some of them also experienced those in lessons, but primarily they were in situations where they felt like they potentially could be judged for kind of career potential, something that could affect them for years to come. And the singers that participated in this study were very frank, really. I was shocked by their honesty and their openness in describing the symptoms that they experienced in these situations. Whether it was a recital hearing, there were stipulations on the study that I conducted that they had a certain amount of performances during the 6-week period so that we could adequately kind of chart their progress or lack thereof. And it seemed that it was pretty palpable, the dry mouth, the racing heart, sweaty palms, kind of jitteriness feeling throughout the body, Some of them also described feeling kind of a dissociative state that happened, specifically in front of public audiences. And I think it's important to know that these are all highly talented singers that went on to sing at top 5 summer apprenticeship programs, and very accomplished young people. So they were not inexperienced in performance, and yet we're still experiencing these regularly. So I found that those were signs of the need for some kind of regular routine that was short and compact and effective in helping them kind of come back to themselves in the moments in preparation.
Okay. So very interesting in what they do, because these are very high level performers. So then you took this idea of yoga and breath, and knowing that past studies have found that yoga and breathing can benefit singers. Some of our listeners may not have a basic knowledge of what exists in the literature. Can you talk a little bit about what has previously been done regarding yoga and breathing, and then what you have found?
Sure. So there's been a lot of research outside of the field of singing and music that clearly shows that the practice of a regular, yoga postures, routine, and breathing exercises can help augment and regulate breathing patterns. But there have been several studies that specifically focused on high-level singers and respiratory patterns. And one of the first ones was conducted in 1997 by Wessner, Noyes, and Davis. And this was a study conducted at the University of Iowa. It was specifically focusing on performance anxiety. There were 450 participants, 197 graduate students. 58 of these were vocalists, and what they reported was that their levels of anxiety in auditioning and performance were at 52.6 to 63.6% in terms of performance anxiety. That's a pretty high level.
It is.
We're talking major, performance institution. And over the course of their study, they found that the reduced levels of performance anxiety were reported at 21%. So that's a pretty good number for a short period of time in terms of reduction of those symptoms. And then there was another study conducted by Boyton, Friestas, and Vientes on the connection between emotions and respiratory patterns. And that was published, that was one of the first ones, in 1994. And they found that negative emotions increased respiratory activity, and that participants with anxiety disorders showed irregular breathing patterns. And so that resulted in shallow shallow kind of clavicular breathing, fast breathing versus the slower abdominal breathing. And that they conducted this using directives. So they would say something, a phrase, and then chart how that manifested itself in the singers' bodies, and there was a direct correlation. So this to me spoke to the need for a study about whether specific breathing exercises could be used in reducing those negative emotion, specific directives, and then their impact on the breathing cycle itself. Stern, Kalsa, and Hoffman studied the impact of a regular yoga practice on music performance anxiety, first at the Kripalu Center in 2007, and then they followed that up with a larger study at the Tanglewood Music Center with 30 participants. And they found that in that 6-week period, that there were significant impacts and that they were retained for over a year following the program. Now, these participants were engaging in these yoga, and I think that many of us would show those kind of benefits, whether we were singers or not, if we were engaged in those kind of intense activities. So again, I was looking to whether there could be a shorter routine that's more accessible, both financially and in terms of our busy lives, that could have similar impacts on singers in their everyday performance life.
Absolutely. So then you developed your dissertation idea, and tell us specifically what types of breathing did you have your singers do, over what period of time, and then what were the results?
So it was a 6-week study, so it's a short study, and it was a small sample group, certainly hoping to follow it up with a larger group at some point. During this 6 week, they had 1 week one-on-one, 1 hour instruction a week. And then they also had YouTube videos, which they could follow along with the same instructor and go through the routine, which was essentially 20 to 25 minutes every day. And then they could chart that in between every activity, the heart rates before and after, their emotional quotients before and after going through this routine. The 2 breathing exercises that I chose were the Ogive Breath, which is traditionally thought of as the ocean breath, which kind of feels like a boca aperta is happening with the mouth closed. So you can kind of hear and feel your own inhalation and exhalation, but it's tailored for the singer so that it's still happening costally, diaphragmatically, not in the clavicular area, which is how it's often taught if you're in a traditional vinyasa studio or something like that. So that sound is something like this.
And you're doing that strictly in and out through your nose, correct?
Strictly in and out through my nose with a lot of space in the oral cavity, the pharyngeal cavity, and that's the way I instructed them to try to do as well. So throughout the postures, they are using this breath to kind of help center them, ground them, and repeating the inhale and the exhalation in their minds so that it kind of regulates and calms. And the other breath is the nostri breathing, which is the alternate nostril breath, which many studies have shown to diminish heart rates across the board. Singers, non-singers, kind of the whole gamut. So in that breath, one plugs, for instance, the left nostril, inhales through the right. Then you plug the right, you hold, you exhale through the left. You pause, and you inhale again through the left. I'm kind of congested, so you can hear that.
I was just thinking, if we have deviated septums or congestion, that can be an issue.
So if one has some congestion, some rhinitis going on, or a cold or allergies, that could cause some potential challenges with nostril breathing. But I found that in all of my own personal yoga practices and my own yoga training, in becoming a yoga instructor, that nostril breathing was the one thing that I did uniformly, no matter where I was singing, backstage, in a closet, in a dressing room, in my car before auditions. That was the one thing I could do that kind of really slowed the world down enough for me to feel grounded before I went on stage. And the double bonus is that when people see you doing this strange in and out thing through your nostrils, they don't talk to you. Really helps you also maintain that kind of calm before you go on.
Absolutely. So did you find that their breathing changed, or that their perceptions of breathing changed, or that their heart rates changed after practicing yoga for a period of time?
Yes. So in this study, 75% of the participants had a diminished heart rate after the 6-week period. And the same was true for the emotional quotient factors, which to me really pointed to the need for further studies, larger groups. And I also really wanted to see if that could be maintained over a long period of time. Many of them wrote me after the study, just kind of anecdotal evidence pointing to how helpful it was during this time that they were practicing these postures and the breathing exercises. Both their teachers saying things like, wow, I never heard you sing so, as grounded as you sounded during that recital hearing, or, that was a really wonderful audition. What clicked for you? And it was during the same period of time in which this study was taking place, which to me kind of pointed to the fact that maybe this was supplementing and helping and supporting all of the wonderful work that the studio teachers are doing with high-level singers at an institution like CCM. Mm-hmm. There's fantastic instruction taking place and coachings and support, but there's also a need for this kind of attention to the wellness of the overall person. And Absolutely. That we're not just treating people as singers, but what else do they need that they're not getting in a fantastic curriculum? And I think that perhaps a regular wellness, yoga, meditation practice is something that could augment and support the rest of the work that's happening there. So
I think that's probably true for all of us in
I
any aspect
just
of our world.
us in any career, absolutely. Just taking that time out to kind of check in with ourselves.
Hmm.
And especially if we're in high pressure careers where there are high stakes, and something like nerves in a 3-minute or 4-minute situation where you're essentially presenting yourself to the world can make a huge impact in whether you're able to really represent yourself well, or whether you're showing up with kind of like 50 or 60% of what you can really do. And that's just attributed to, heart rate, breathing patterns, not being able to really steady everything and focus the way you can. So,
Was there anything that really surprised you about the outcomes of your study that you weren't expecting?
there were a few surprises. One of the singers had had a regular yoga practice for years, and her heart rate actually increased over the 6-week period. That I found extremely shocking, actually. But when she talked to me about some of the things that she'd been thinking about while she was practicing, one of the stipulations was that people were not practicing an outside form of yoga while they were in this 6-week study.
Okay.
But I think that she had studied for so many years under a very rigorous kind of almost yoga boot camp-like environment, and she took a lot of that with her into this practice. So I think so many of us singers are pretty type A. We're very intense individuals. And if we are engaging in activities that further kind of amp up the adrenaline glands and the fight or flight system, which in some cases, even forms of yoga can do, depending on how they are taught, then that could translate to kind of a higher,
Heart rate.
faster, heart rate and respiratory pattern. So I was surprised by that, and yet we talked about it, and then it kind of made sense to me that
Yes.
she was kind of bringing along all of her former education and experience and kind of translating that. And my desire was for her to really check in as a singer and not as a yoga practitioner. And bring kind of a different mindfulness and energy to the work that we were doing, which is very different from going to the yoga studio and working to your max to, create a beautiful form and a beautiful body, of that.
Right. This was a stress reduction technique yoga.
Yes, it was not for the yoga booty. It was
That's
for,
right.
The calm mind, calm breath.
Good. What are there a few recommendations that you would make to singers who are interested in reducing stress and improving their overall heart health?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the other surprises in this study for me was the overall cardiovascular fitness of the participants, or the lack thereof. I think that singers come in all sizes and shapes, and there is no argument for we need to be one particular size or we need to be marathon runners, none of that. But singing on the stage is an extremely athletic endeavor. And so I think there does need to be attention paid to the level of fitness that we are all kind of maintaining overall, knowing if we want to be out on the concert stage, on the opera stage, that the demands are pretty great. So regardless of our size or shape, we need to be physically fit. And a lot of that has to do with heart health, and that will affect our heart rates and our ability to regulate them under stress. So the better shape we are in, the more able we will be to lower those heart rates with good instruction and good techniques. And if normally we don't have any kind of exercise regime, then obviously under stress our heart rates are going to spike pretty precipitously, and we won't have the same ability to bring them down as if we were regularly engaging an exercise program that fits our particular, body's needs, age, all of that. So I think that's one thing. I think it's really necessary for us all to find a routine that works for us, and that changes, year to year. So to be flexible with that, but to be really mindful of staying at our kind of fighting fit,
Absolutely.
And then I think it's really important to know that it's a high-stress, highly demanding lifestyle, so to seek early ways of calming ourselves and feeling supported and feeling like there is a safe spot for us to go to, whether that is yoga or meditation or prayer or whatever it is, that we have those places to go within ourselves because if one becomes more and more successful, those stresses just increase. And once you're out in the real world, no one is going to say to you, well, you really need to take a moment and meditate. No, I mean, it's like you got to interview it here, and you got to costume fitting here, and you need to be here at this time. And, people are assuming that you already have those tools. And there's so many things to address when preparing for a professional career that sometimes one can neglect self-care and finding the ways in which one can best take care of oneself. And long term, those can be detrimental. So I think it's really important to anticipate the need for that even before you feel it necessarily. Because academia is still somewhat insulated. You still have a large kind of bubble of support and love. And it's not necessarily the case once you get out into the real world. So
I think that is such great advice, and you have given so many good tips today. Thank you for all of your time and expertise in this area. Are there any last tidbits you'd like to add or thoughts that you have in parting?
I think the last would just be that a lot of the work that we did one-on-one with the singers involved also repeating very positive messages to self. And I think that's extremely important. Oftentimes when we step up to sing, there are so many voices in our heads, whether they're our own inner critics or our voice teacher, our voice coach, or the last competition panel we sang for, that those voices are ringing in our minds before we step onto the stage. And we need to also have the positive messages. So whether those are, you are wonderful, you have a beautiful voice, you are calm, you're prepared, you are ready to sing, that there are mantras that we can also add into the conversation with those other voices, so that we are creating a real atmosphere of gratitude and openness and love, so that we can create our most beautiful artwork, that we do our best work when we facilitate that positive environment, both in body, in mind, and in spirit.
I think that is beautiful. And again, this is Dr. Katherine Jolly, who has shared her time and expertise with us. She is, again, an assistant professor of music at St. Louis University. And we are so fortunate to have her here with us. As a reminder, I'd like you to make sure that you visit nats.org to find out more about their programs, competitions, and events. And follow NATS on Facebook and Twitter at Official NATS. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for listening today. And if you have any questions, you can find Dr. Jolly's contact information on our NATS Vocal Health and Wellness spot at nats.org.